Hi, everyone. How are you all today? I hope you're having an amazing day. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Brittany, and I will be your studio host from Etcher Lab. Today, we have a wonderful artist named Sucharita. She is located in India, in Mumbai. And we're so excited to get started, but just a few things to note before we do. If you have a question, please feel free to ask. We are going to have a little Q&A session at the end. So if you have a question, feel free, just type it in all capital letters, just so we can defer it a little bit easier from a comment. And we will also be having a mini workshop with Sucharita. So I'll be posting a link right now. And then also later on, in case you missed it. Hi, everybody. Hi, thanks for joining. All right, so we do these live demos quite often, and we always have a mini workshop to follow it. So if you really like Sucharita's work and you want to learn more from her, go out and check that link that I just posted in the chat. Without further ado, I'm going to pass things over to Sucharita, but make sure that you check out the chat every once in a while because I'll be posting some information important to you guys. Sucharita, do you want to take over and show us some of your work?
Yes. So, hi everyone. Thank you so much, Brittany, for having me here today. And thank you everyone for joining us today on this live demo. So I'll give a very brief introduction about myself. So I'm Sucharita, and I go by the name Sucharitas on Instagram. I live and work in Mumbai, India. So I have been a graphic design professional for, last 20 years. But last 1.5 years, I've taken up like illustration, and I'm professionally doing illustration and working as an artist too. So I love painting animals, and I love painting botanical. So I tried a way to, merge both the worlds. So here I am presenting to you some botanical whimsical animals, as I call them. So if you can, Brittany, so I'll show the, some of my work. So is this highlighted?
Yep, you're all good.
Yep. Okay, so today we are going to, I'll just pull this down a bit so that, so this is what we are going to be painting today. So that's a botanical crab. Also, here are some of my other paintings. And this is something that we are going to do in our mini workshop. If you can see these lovely textures, I'll be teaching how to get them using salt. And I will quickly take you through some of my other work. So that's one. So here is another.
So cool.
These are all the, so I do a lot of paintings which are, bordering fairy tale-ish characters. This is one of my favorites. That's a botanical rabbit.
Wow.
That's an enchanted forest. And that's a bat here. So what I'll do is I'll now quickly start on with the demo.
Sounds good.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Give me a moment.
No problem.
Yeah. So I will, what I'll do is, as I use the materials, I'm going to tell you what they are so that you know what I'm using. So here is the sketch that I have already prepared from before. I use a putty eraser or a kneadable eraser, and I always roll it like this, so it's easier to remove all the dark graphite marks. So what I do is, before I start painting, I just do this so that, see how light it's becoming.
Yeah, that's a good trick.
Yeah, so I roll it like this so that, it doesn't, it gives more surface area that way. Yeah, so once we have this. So I'll be showing both wet and wet technique, like wet on wet and dry on wet technique. So I will start with this first. So that's a silver brush, black velvet I'm using. It's like number 10 size. So what I'll do is I'll start with a wet on wet. So first I will take some paint. I'll just keep mixing them here. So I like using, making different shades of green, not probably directly from the palette. So what I'll do is first I'll make these various shades of green. I'll prepare these shades of green so that while painting, we don't have to stop and we can just pick up. This is like a cool green that I'm making, and here I've made, added yellow ochre. So it's a warmer green. Also, I will be adding a little bit of ultramarine here again, and a little bit of burnt umber to give it that nice variation. See, you can see 3 different variations of green here. So first what we do is we will wet the paper here. It's okay if it has little bit of green showing, because anyways we'll be having green in this. So I nicely wet the paper and just go in with the colors. We have a reference, but we don't need to go exactly by the reference. It's just a reference point. I like mixing colors on the paper rather than on the palette, because you get a nice variation that way.
If you need the reference, oh, sorry. I was just going to say, if you need the reference, so sorry, I keep talking when you're about to talk. I was just going to quickly say, if you need the reference and you can't find it in the description, here is a little link. Sorry to cut you off.
Yeah. So this is how we can directly mix the colors on the paper itself. So you get a nice gradation and variation of colors, and it doesn't look like a very flat color. So here, because the surface area was more, I have done a wet on wet technique. What I will do now is I will do for the smaller areas, I will do a wet on dry. So that gives us a lot of control over what we are painting. See these nice, I don't mind these, colors bleeding into this main area. So again, I'm using the technique of mixing it on paper. I'll keep adding some, here I'm adding a bit of orange. And what I do is I try to keep darker colors around here so that, you get that little shading and differentiation. And since it is a cactus here, it transforms into a cactus, and there are some flowers there. I'll try to get in that color there as well. And don't worry about these colors bleeding into each other, because I think that gives a very nice effect actually. So I'm using magenta here now. And see, it's bleeding into it, but that's okay. So if you have any questions regarding the paint I'm using or brushes or anything, you can ask me about it.
It looks like you're using the Etcher Lab palette, right?
Yeah, so that's the Etcher palette. I love this palette because it's so easy to carry around. So
In case
mostly
anybody is, oh,
yeah, so mostly I'm using these 2-3 colors as of now, not much.
in case anybody is wondering, I just posted Sucharita's Instagram in the chat if you wanted to check out more of her work.
So again, I'll go into like a darker shade towards the bottom. So this is, I try to finish my watercolors in 3 steps maximum, but I like it when, you know, already you can see these gradations without, you know, going in again with a second layer of paint. Like in the first wash itself, you can see that we are getting these gradations and variations in color.
And what kind of paper are you using?
So this is this is Stillman and Burn hot. It's 300 GSM paper. It is a cold press paper, but their paper is slightly, it's not so grainy. It's almost like a hot press, but it says cold press. So it's a 300 GSM paper.
Is it 100% cotton?
Yes, it's 100% cotton. So we can go into, I'm just quickly trying to do this because today we don't have too much time, but we can always go into a lot of details while making these variations in color as well. That's yellow ochre. So I'll just quickly get into the other parts. Again, you can just drop in some other color. Like here, I'm adding some ultramarine, just dropping it here. It's very important to keep the water content right, because if it's too dry or if it's too wet, it tends to give a different texture. I like painting with lot of water. So when you use lot of water, what happens is the way the color mixes, I like the way they mix uh, together. Like so here if I use this color automatically bleeds into the paint. You know, so these are the flowers of the cactus, if you may say, inspired by the flowers of the cactus. And it's a nice pop of color that you get. I always keep a paper towel handy just in case you go wrong somewhere and you need to use it. These 3-4 colors you can keep mixing in different proportions so that you get a lot of variety and variation.
We just got a question about the use of water.
Yes.
How do you know when you have enough water and when you don't?
See, if you want to kind of, if you want the colors to mix with each other, if you keep it too dry, you will be able to, while you're painting, you will be able to feel that the colors are not mixing well. So depending on the kind of result you want to achieve, like say, suppose what I did here right now, if the water was too less, the paint would not flow into each other. So I think that is something, a lot of it really is your personal judgment. So you keep painting and you will know that if, you know, if it's the right amount of, so if you're doing something like this, you fill your brush with a lot of water so that it's easy for the paints to flow into each other. And I'll show you in the later stage, I'll be using a slightly drier brush to do the details where I don't want the mixing of colors so much. So you'll know when to use that, like the amount of water that you need.
I hope that helped answer your question, May.
See here, if the water wasn't too much in this space, if the water wasn't too much, it wouldn't, you know, bleed into each other. So if it is doing that, so you'll know that, you know, that it's the right amount of water. Also, it is, you know, the effect that you want in your painting. If there's no right or wrong as to how much amount of water to be used, it's like everything is the kind of effect that you want to achieve for your painting.
When choosing your color palette, is that something that you plan ahead?
Yes, roughly I plan ahead. Like say for example, here I know I want to paint a crab and I want to have some parts of it looking like, you know, probably the flower of a cactus. So I do plan ahead, but you know, once in a while you just see how where it is going and then you choose one color and use it. But yeah, mostly I do have a color palette in mind before I start. Not exactly fully, but overall, like a broad idea, I do have. I love painting with earth colors, so I have a lot of them in my most of my paintings. And I always like to dull them a bit, not use pure pigments, like pure colors.
And to dull them, do you just add its complementary color in order to
Yes,
dull it?
yes,
Okay.
yes, that's what I do. And yeah, so and always like say for example green, I never use a green which is available in, you know, the set in the tubes directly, because the moment you mix it with another color, the variation you get is a lot. Like this shade is not like this shade, or this shade is not like this shade. So that happens only when you are randomly mixing the colors in certain proportions. If you're directly using it from the tube or you know, the pan, it'll be like probably the exactly same color that you're using here is what you're using here. So if you
Right.
want to get a lot of variety, then it's good to mix the colors and get a particular shade.
Makes it a little bit more on the realistic side.
Yeah. And you know, the amount of variation you get, it's amazing. With just 2-3 colors, the variations of shades you get is lot. So even the brush that I'm using here, it's a mix of synthetic and squirrel hair. So it also, you know, you can, it stores a lot of water and paint. So you don't have to keep picking up colors. I'm just picking up the colors because I want variations in shade, not otherwise. So I'm just trying to give this a cactusy feel. So, you know, when I was, the whole concept behind this was sea and desert. So, you know, something, the crab is like a sea element and the cactus is a desert element. And also when I saw the shape, I found some synergies. That's why I thought that it'll be a good way to put them together. Okay, so we are almost done with this. I'll just add in the last few flowers here. After this, we will go into the second layer of detailing. So to just make it interesting, I've made some kelp-like structures behind. So what I'll do is I'll use a much, like a less intense color. So if you see, I'm using the brush a little dry here so that the paint doesn't flow too much, and it's like a, so here I'm using way less water, because when you use less water, you do have slightly more control. So this is a cooler green that I'm using, lot of ultramarine. So if you think that you have too much water in the brush and you don't want so much water, what you do is you just wipe the excess water out with your paper towel. So it's a way drier brush that I'm using here. Very little color, lots of water, and the brush is dry, pretty dry. And I've made the color much lighter here so that, you know, you get that depth. It looks like that's behind. And this is a slightly cooler green. I'll just finish adding this here. First, I'm putting in a lighter layer. Later, if I feel that After finishing the main crab, if I feel that it needs to be darker, I'll make it darker then. I think I've left out a few of these little details, so I'll just paint in those. Adding in just a few more of these flowers. I'm adding a little bit of orange here to give it a little dimension, a second layer.
Just to let you know, we're about halfway through.
Okay, yeah. Okay, so I think I left a bit of, yeah. After this, I'll just paint in the eye. So I never usually use black. So I'm using like a burnt umber and the ultramarine to get a little darker shade. And what I'll do is I will make the little tentacle like things they have out here. And to add a little pop of color and have some synergies, I'm painting in the eyes a little similar color to that of the flowers. So always try to balance your painting by using, the same colors in different places rather than using totally different and new colors. So what I'll do is, this is almost dry now. I will start the second layer to give in that little depth. So what I'll do is, again, I'm mixing the greens and keeping the palette ready so that I can just pick the colors. So when you're painting wet on wet, you have to be ready with your colors, because if otherwise the water will dry and it will be very difficult for you to then get that effect. So you have to be pretty much ready with all the colors in place. So I've made so many greens because all of them have these different, quantities of and proportions of colors. So right now what I'll do is I'll roughly give a depth to it by using a slightly darker shade. So you can actually go by the reference or just, take a very rough idea how it looks actually and then go by it. You don't have to really go exactly as the reference. Right now I'm not looking at the reference. I just had done the sketch keeping the reference in mind. So right now, again, it's wet brush. Now the brush is a little more drier than what I had used the first time, because I want these solid shapes to come. So at this point, it's not like a realistic painting. So you can just add in the kind of details you want to make it look the way you envision it, not necessarily like a realistic variation of this. So I'm adding these little details here.
I always love this stage because you truly see it start to come together and take its shape.
Yes. I love the part. So, okay, so for highlighting, I always use, wherever I need highlighting, I use white acrylic paint. You can use white watercolor also, but I prefer acrylic because it's bright and nice. So I always love it when I come to that stage because it really adds, gets things together.
Hmm. I've seen people use white gouache as well.
Yeah. Somehow I have this white acrylic paint, this one, it's a Daleroni one here, if you can see. So I have found this very nice. The white is like really white. You don't have to go over it many times to get that effect. I'll try a white gouache also. So here, I'm just making these details so that, you can make the demarcation between, say, the two bulbs, or I don't know what they're called, of the cactuses, the two parts. Here, wherever there is a joint, I'm just making those little dark. You can just merge them or leave them as is. So when you're mixing color on paper, half your work is already done because you've already got the variations in color and everything. So now you just have to add in those little bit of details to kind of give it that finished look. Here, I'm only working on these joints. And here, sometimes you can just add in some texture to it, some lines. Since this is right under this main shell, I'll just go in with like a little shadowy effect here. So I always prefer adding a cool color to this shadow, like this ultramarine, and I'm using something called ultramarine red. So I'll just add in this to get that little shadow. I think once we are done with this, we'll just have one more step to go. That's the white, which adds that pop. Here again. So in the second stage, you can go in and correct some shapes if you think they are not proper. So slowly you have started getting that depth with the second layer. You can go and add in a little bit of these dents here and there. We'll mainly do it. Okay, so now what we'll do is, if you actually see a cactus, you'll see these little dots where the thorns or spikes come out from. So we'll make those with, so I think this is mostly dry. So this, try to do it where you are sure that the color has dried. And here you take the paint and keep the brush as dry as possible, because you just want these little dots and you don't want them to bleed. So if you see the body of a cactus, these are these little dots where the thorns or spines come from. So we can just randomly put them. Here again, I'm using magenta. So right now I'm avoiding the places where I can see the water, the paper is little wet. So we can go back to those places where, so in watercolor, it's good to, keep painting in different parts depending on where the paint has dried. So I'll leave those and come back to it later. So here you can now at this stage add depth to it. Now what I'll do is I will be doing the highlights and the thorns with this. So I usually shake it a bit. And for this, what I do is I always use a different palette. Since it's an acrylic color, what happens is that it wouldn't come off till it's dry. It kind of gets stuck. So never put it in your main watercolor palette. And you can take very little because it dries up very fast. So you can always go back and pour in more color. So right now I'm using a 000 brush. You can take any thin brush, or if you are not very comfortable using a brush, what you can do is you can always use a fine liner like this. Like if you are doing it like doing a black color for any kind of detailing. So here I'm going to go in. And add these little, see how bright these white look. So I'm adding in these details here. So if you keep your, hold your brush like this, you'll get nice round dots. I'll take a thinner brush so that I can get these thorns that are nice and thin. So if you keep the brush dry, you will get thinner strokes, and with a wet brush, you'll get strokes that are thicker. So depending on what you want, you can keep. So these are the thorns. See here, I've taken a lot of paint, so you'll see what the difference in strokes that you get. One is thick and one is kind of thinner. Do you want me to put this down since I'm doing the details? I don't know if you can really.
Sure, yeah, that would be great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So you get thinner strokes with these. So for this, you can use a white gel pen if you are not comfortable with a brush.
Is that a titanium acrylic white?
This is, it says, it just says white.
Oh, okay, yeah. It's
Yeah, it's an acrylic artist ink, Rowney artist acrylic ink. But what I've realized, the white you get with this is a very nice white, like it really shines through. You know, you can just add in these details. I think your work really comes together after you put in all these little details. They are small details, but they really add. Okay, so try to do the stroke where, you know, down to up, because otherwise the thickness will be inverse, like it will become thick to thin instead of the other way around. So I'll quickly do these details. You know, for this, I'm just doing it quickly because we don't have much time, but you can really take your time and get into details and do these nicely and slowly. So with this acrylic white, you have to really work fast because it tends to dry very quickly. So I always love adding a white shine to the eye, but I don't know, the crab doesn't require, but I'll still put it because I love putting them. Yeah, so mostly it is like this, and here again you can keep adding details. There is no end to adding details, and I love adding them. So you can do this little shadow here. So it just keeps adding to the depth when you do these little details. You know, I'm just putting a shadow because this is under. So adding a shadow will help you get that depth. So this will be a little darker at this point. Here also. Yeah, and you can kind of just put this up a bit. Yeah. And you can just finish this by adding some details. Yeah.
Yeah,
So here it is.
looks great.
And if you want, I always love splatters. So whoever loves splatters can always add them. So I'll just do that a bit. So you take a bigger brush with a lot of water. So if you want to add in that little splatter to give that extra effect, you can do that. And you can
Love
finish
that.
off with the signature. Yep. Yeah.
Awesome. Looks so good.
Thank you.
The cactus and the crab work so well together
Yes.
because they're both like very like spiky and rigid.
Right.
So it looks really good.
Thank you.
All right, so I'm going to spotlight us all again, and we're going to ask some questions.
Okay. So I'll just.
Yeah, raise it up so the light's not right in your face.
Yeah, so right now I have a halo over my head, but yeah.
Perfect,
Yes.
perfect. You're like a little angel. All right, so I saved some questions from earlier, but if you have any new ones, please feel free to type them into the chat. All right, so which brushes, brand, and series are you using and which sizes?
Okay, so most of the painting I have used silver brush, black velvet. So under silver brush they have this black velvet brush, and I have used size 10 for doing the main body, and I think this is size 4. So as I said, it's like a mix of synthetic and squirrel hair brush. So that's one. Then I have for doing the medium kind of detail, I had used this Raphael size 1 brush. And for the thorns, I have used this zero, actually it's 00 and 000. So it's a local brand that you get in India. It's called Camlin, but I guess any other brand would have. So get like a very, very thin brush for that. But I have used Camlin 00. So those are the 3 brushes. So mostly I tend to use these brushes only for, though I have a lot of brushes, but I end up using those 5, 6 brushes for everything.
Yeah, you get your go-tos and you
Yes.
just always end up using them. Yeah, I know exactly what you mean.
Yes.
All right, so how did you first come up with the idea of combining plants and animals? It's such a neat concept.
Okay, so when I started, so it's when the lockdown started, I really started painting, regularly, and I started painting animals because I'd never painted them before. So I thought, let's take it up as a challenge and let's start painting animals. But then every day, it became, what to draw. I don't know what to draw. So I thought, let me start with A to Z of animals. So I started painting that, and then I found it boring, and sometime I would want to paint botanical. So then when one day I sat and I realized that there are a lot of synergies in terms of not just shapes, but if you think in a way, say for example, I drew a bat, so I found out what is their natural habitat. So I tried to combine those two and figure out a way to combine those two. So you have a concept, so you have the bat made out of elements where they usually live in. Okay, so for this crab, again I thought of the desert and the sea. So I use these various elements, and sometimes the shape also kind of lends itself. So for example, if you see this crab, the tentacles, if you see, it very nicely merges itself with with a cactus shape. So these are the various ways I try to think and put them together. Sometimes it's the shape that kind of helps me bring things together, or like habitat. So I think in different ways how you can combine, but mostly because I love painting both. So I just was thinking, how can I have both of them together. And so once I started painting, I I it kind of opens your mind up, so you think in a certain way. So that's how I started painting them like this.
I love that. It's a great way to get rid of like artist block.
Yeah. And the great way to get rid of an artist block is just think of a theme and just do it. Like, you don't just get on to doing it, because once you start doing that, it'll automatically kind of help you through. That's what
Yeah.
that has been my experience.
Yeah, great answer. I agree. Next question. So earlier when I asked you about water control, we had a follow-up question. So she was saying often she wants it to bleed into each other, but it doesn't. And if she adds more water, it just kind of cauliflowers. Do you know that term?
Yeah, I know. Like basically, you get those blooms. So you know
Yeah.
what happens is, you should add the water when, see, if you paint like if it's slightly dry, and then if you try to add extra water and extra paint to it, it'll bloom. But if you load the brush and then directly use it, that bloom will not happen. I know what you're saying. So once that mostly happens when you have painted and then you realize you want the water to, the paints to bleed, and then you add an extra color to the wet surface which is already there. So if you do that, then it will bloom. So what you can do is you can probably try that out on a rough paper initially. Like as you keep doing it, you'll understand when how much water to add. But if you're a beginner, always you can have a scrap piece of paper along with you and just try it out before you do it on the main sheet. Yeah. So don't try to add, and especially when you add like fresh water, like there's a lot of water and then you're adding it to the already painted part which is still wet, you'll get those blooms. So that's how you
if that happens, should they wait for it to completely dry and then maybe go over it and try to make the colors bleed a new time?
What you can do is you can use a paper towel, like no harm in doing that. Like say for example, I'll show you. So suppose if you have done something like this, okay,
I spotlighted it. Yep.
Okay. So if you have done something like this and you feel it's not okay, so you just take the paper towel and kind of see, it's all gone. So you can
basically
either
erases
blot
it.
it out. The best part about watercolor is that one will never really know that's a mistake. It'll just look like a pattern that you have got. So you can blot it out or you can wait for some time. I usually don't. Lot of people use hair dryer, but usually I don't use a hair dryer because I do my painting uh, with lot of water. So if I use a hair dryer, what happens? The water tends to take a direction because of the air pressure, the direction of water. So I usually don't use, I tend to wait it out, which is not a very easy thing to do. So but you still have to.
That's what we were just saying in the chat. May is the one who was asking the questions, and she was just saying, planning in beforehand, testing things is good advice. I should follow that. I usually don't have the patience, and I was just about to type. I have the exact same issue.
Neither do I. So the best way is, the water thing. I think it'll get solved once you have done, 10 or 15 paintings. You will automatically know how the water or the paint reacts, like the amount, how it reacts when it has a certain amount of water in the brush. So I think that you'll get that.
Once you get used to the water control too, I find the issue with patience helps if you work on maybe two pieces at the same time. That way one's drying, you can move on to the other one. That way you don't...
Yes. Also, what I do is I try to paint like different parts, like, which is away from each other and it'll not really affect it. Like if I'm painting a flower, probably I'll do like the center part of the flower first and then do the outer parts and then come back to the middle. So, you don't have to wait so much. So you can do work on different parts at a given time, which doesn't touch each other. So that way you can manage the patience part of it.
Yeah. All right, last question here, unless we get a couple more. Do you have any tips on shading and lighting? I usually struggle to imagine where the shadow should fall, especially without a reference.
Okay, so see, the easiest part is to imagine and observe. That's the only way you will know how to do it. So in daily life, you kind of observe how the light and shadow works, or the best way is actually to have a reference initially when you're not so used to it. So, and those are the only two ways. So you observe for everything, you just observe how the light and shadow works, or, kind of think, imagine your light source, and then you have to imagine how it'll fall, but that will only come when you have observed enough.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Yeah.
so in painting, I always feel observation is way more like it's as important as, you know, kind of putting pen to paper. So you
Yeah.
need to keep looking at things all the time.
Yeah, I agree. And then also a good way to remember where your light source might be coming from is if you put like a little dot on your page or something, just to remember that's where the sun is located
Yeah.
in your
So
image or something like that.
yeah, so what you can do is you can probably take a simple object and do these little observations. You take a light
Mhm.
source, put that object and see how the shadow falls.
Yep.
And then you can start, you know, using more complex object. First, you can start with a cube or a ball, so it's easy to see how the shadow falls. But slowly you can probably take like a flower pot or anything and see and put the light and see. So once you have observed that enough, you will get it. It will not be difficult for you to, you know, kind of get that
Yeah, yeah,
light and shadow.
for sure. We still have just a few minutes left if anybody had any other questions. Um, while you possibly type those into the chat, I'll just announce again that she will be doing a mini workshop with us. That's an hour and a half class, so slightly longer, and it'll be more at your pace. I know we might have gone a little quick today, but that was just so she can get through the painting and really show you her style. So if you want to learn more about how to do these botanical creatures that are just so cool, in my opinion, I love the combination, then please join us for her mini workshop on September 20th. If you can't make it for the exact day and time and you really want to learn more, please just buy it and then you can get sent a recording. So we always record these mini workshops and we send it out to you within a few days after the session is done. So if you missed the link that I put earlier, I'll just post it again. And what will you be teaching for that one?
1 second, I'll just show it to you. So we will be doing this. 1 second, I'll pull it down again. Yeah. So we'll be working on this one. And
So cool.
if you notice all these textures that I've got, so I will show you specifically how to get these like cool textures in your watercolor. Yeah, so this
Is
is the
that
one which will
salt?
be, yeah, yeah.
Okay.
So, you know,
Yeah, that's so
also
cool.
for this again, when to use the salt, because a lot of times I get these things about, you know, I've put salt, but it didn't get, the effect didn't come. So, you know, there's a specific time when you need to put it, a specific wetness when you need to put that. So we can go into details of all of that.
Awesome. Yeah, so cool. I personally love owls, and the way you created that with the wing, it's really cool.
Thank
So
you.
if I'm not hosting, I'll definitely be checking out the mini workshop myself.
Thank you, Brittany.
I think we have one last quick little question here. Sunflower is wondering, can you do it with black pen as well? I think she's wondering for the outline if they're worried about
Yes,
if
I
they're
will.
new.
Yeah, you can use something like this, like a fine liner
Mhm.
here. So you can use a fine liner and you can get those details, or any like a white gel pen. So initially, when if you're not very confident that you'll be able to get those strokes, so you can use a fine liner for that. So no harm in doing that. Initially, I used to do, when I started, I used to use a fine liner.
Yeah, yeah. All right, so I just posted a link for the Facebook group as well. If you really enjoyed this live demo and you want to be more part of the Etcher community, then please join our Facebook group. It's exclusive to those who join our live demos and mini workshops, and we even have some of our artists in there. So if you're somebody who just wants to be part of a like-minded community and join other artists, whether you're looking for help with a painting, a critique, or you just want to have fun on there, it's a great place. So you're more than welcome to join. Just click on the link there and you'll be able to join. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining. It was a wonderful workshop. Thank you again, Sucharita. Always wonderful to have such talented artists.
Thank you so much, Brittany, and your entire team.
Yeah, thank you to everybody at Etcher also who made this possible. And I think that's pretty much it from our end. We are at 11 o'clock now, so we did the full hour. Thank you everybody for joining and watching with us. I hope you had a chance to paint along. And if not, this will be posted on our YouTube channel. So make sure to check that out if you wanted to try it again. And if you did paint along with us, make sure to tag us on Instagram or Facebook using the hashtag #EtcherStudio. And your work might be featured on our stories, or you might even be entered into a draw to win something great. So I'll just put that in the chat as well in case you wanted to see the hashtag written out. And without further ado, I'm going to close the stream. Thank you so much, everybody, again. It was wonderful to have you all. If you wouldn't mind just filling out a quick survey, it helps us improve our content for future demos. I hope you all have a great day. Bye.
Bye, bye. Thank you. So I'll leave the meeting here.